going to turn it over now to Dr. Thomas Keeley.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Tom Keeley, and Mr. Lofter had reached out to me. We've known each other for a few years, and as we're looking at 2019 and looking at what the vision is, what the steps need to be, kind of before you really pinpoint maybe a vision of exactly the most important items to get to do. Mark had asked me to just kind of look at what is the fiscal state, where are we at. And I do a 12-point review, looking at cash balances, board reports, financial documents, as well as a lot of the funds. So today, I want to thank Mr. Tom Deichel. Dr. Deichel gave me a lot of information, and it was great to work with, working through this. So this is not a fiscal audit. I am not a CPA. I am an assistant superintendent in charge of business. I teach school business finance at Indiana State University. I teach superintendency, kind of politics of superintendency, and I also teach fiscal management of construction, maintenance, roofs, how to do bond issues and referendums. So those are the areas that I teach at Indiana State. So it lends itself perfectly to a review like this because I'm a teacher. And so today, I really decided that I give you the 12 points, but we walk through each of the tabs as a learning opportunity for the school board and for anybody who's here in the audience. We did make a 3-ring binder for you with tabs A through O. Each tab is very specific in its intent to give you information. And so I just started out with the first 2 pages as a summary, kind of an executive summary of an overview of school financial management. I'll spend 9 slides on just an educational opportunity of how do we do fund management? How do we know dollars? How do we talk about that in public school finance space? Because it's very different than a business space. And then I'll summarize each of the tabs and we'll go through kind of cash balances and goal setting. And this is not to be derogatory, but I do want to show you where you compare to 15 other schools with 10,000 or around 10,000, 11,000 students, and look at their cash balances, look at what their goals are, what they should be. Furthermore, I'll go down the list and we'll talk about some other observations that I've had. Student per pupil expenditures in your pattern. And so I divide that up by building, just to give you, again, the numbers, okay? So does anybody have any questions before I get started on that? The board? No. Okay, so we'll go to tab, is it A? Right here, overview of school financial management. And so 5 through 14 are a list of all the funds. This may be rudimentary, may be something everybody already knows. I'm not sure if you talk a lot about this in board meetings. But I used a document that I use not only in class, but I also use it with my own school board so that they know we have changed finances 3 times in the state of Indiana since 2008. That's when I started, was with the new financial management system in 2008. And then 2019, we had another serious revamp. So basically the budget funds are this, and I refer to these because I'm going to talk about each of the funds down the road. The ones in orange are gone away. 2018 they were used, but you need to know that they're there because my fiscal review is pretty much from 2010 to 2019. So I have about 9 years worth of data in dollars and cents. And during that time, we have the general fund, and that pays for people. That is now the education fund in 2019 moving forward. We have the debt service, and we will invite Steeple. We have a couple of gentlemen here from Steeple who will talk about debt service, TIFs, parcels of land, assessed value, some very technical things. Pension debt, operations fund, referendum fund, referendum debt fund. Some of these you may have, some of these you may not have. The other 3 orange ones is the CPF, transportation, bus replacement. Again, those 3 consolidated into the one below it called the operations. And again, the orange ones are gone. The education fund for you was advertised at $64,292,430. And over the last 3 years, that's actually increased about $3 million. So I've kind of looked through that, and we'll look at that data a little bit later. Education fund expenses are for teachers, insurance, it's people money. But some technology, curriculum, things like that come out of the education fund. The revenue from that does come from your student count, and so it's a pretty easy to say that if you've gone up $3 million in the last 3 years, then your student count is stable, if not increasing. There's also the complexity grant, academic honors grant, special ed, vocational, and prime time monies all fill in to the education fund. Debt service is for payment of long-term debt, interest on long-term debt, and also some reimbursement for textbooks and technology, things like that. I'll get that technical in the budget presentation. Pension debt is a teacher retirement debt. That is an area that I'm going to talk about, funded versus unfunded liabilities that I identified later on in one of the tabs, so we'll talk about that. The operations fund, this one is something that is affected by the circuit breaker, and again, Steve will talk about tax cap losses and circuit breaker information. But basically, operations, it mows the lawn, it's technology, it puts carpet in, roofs, all the operations and everything is in there. Purchase of equipment, desks, furniture, office equipment, things like that. And now we have transportation and buses in the operation. Transportation expenses are bus driver salary, benefits, and fuel, and things like that. Bus replacement, of course, identified a very good opportunity potentially with your bus fleet. So I'll share that a little bit later as well. But now we put seat belts and we put security videos on buses, and all of that comes out of that operations portion as well. You do get various miscellaneous taxes that do come in that complement primarily the debt service fund, and these are the licensed excise, the FIT, and the CVED, and that's what these are called. All part of the revenue streams that are coming in. Operations is affected by the circuit breaker, and Steve will talk a little bit about that. Because we do have tax caps, and that is not in effect with the education fund at all. All right, so now let's, if you go to tab B, those of you with a binder, those of you without a binder, you'll just see the summary page. Those of you with a binder and information, behind every blue page, I have some documentation and trends and information to share with you so that you can exactly see where you're at. So the fiscal trend of revenue and expenses on page 1, you can see that your overall cash balance, and that is, you can turn it sideways, you can turn it that way, and maybe even have to get some glasses on. Somewhat consistent dollars, 2010, 11, 12, 13. Overall dollars did start to go up in 14 and 15. However, during that same time, expenditures on people was increasing. And so your people expenditures went from $3.4 million in 14 as a cash balance to $980,000 in 15, so under $1 million. So you went from $3.4 million to under $1 million in that 1 year. That's a big year. I mean, that's a lot of money. And I wanted to make sure that I was reading all the numbers and I give you the right information. Today is not a conversation of crisis by any means, because in 2017, and then again in 2017 or 18, 19 school year, when you look at your dollars, you did go down at 15, and you can see in the upper right-hand corner, 2.4 million. You went down 362,000 in 16, then you leveled off going into 17 and 18. Remaining cash balance got down to 143,000 at the end of 17, and then January 1, 2019, it went up a few dollars. It went up 11,000, so you had $154,000 in that fund. So that's the education fund, and I highlight that the most because it's really important, because those are our people money, and it's stabilized in the last 2 years. But 2014 and 15, you would know the history. I'm a numbers guy, so I'm just kind of painting a picture with the numbers for you. So if you go behind the next blue tab, I just wanted to give you an opportunity as a school board to understand the comparison across the state of Indiana. So I use schools like Avon. The second one there is Columbus, Brownsburg, Center Grove, Monroe County, New Albany, Floyd. These are 8 to 10,000, 11,000 students. Average cash balance in those, you can see on the right, is ranging from 2.2 million all the way up to $17 million on an annual bank balance. Down at the bottom, I gave you some five other comparisons of even larger school districts, over 12,000 students. And as you can see, there are some schools with challenges. Elkhart Community Schools is at $1 million deficit. Hammond has a lot of circuit breaker, a lot of property tax issues going on, and they are down to $300,000. So Greater Clark is at 154, and that's something that I feel really needs to be a focus moving forward as a cash balance. Additional note at the bottom, just in the finance area, I did put your self-insurance fund, which is Fund 1100, and then I gave you some Form 9 so that you can watch that over time. The self-insurance fund 4 years ago was $3.2 million. It has steadily gone down, about $500,000 to more each year, to now it's at $37,000. At the bottom, oh, I guess those numbers are right there, 2.9, I summarized, to 1.2 to 600 to 36,252. So that is something where insurance is not meant to be making money because, you know, we the people pay our premiums, right? We the school corporation pays 78% of premiums, right? It's not there to make money, but it's fiscally responsible to have 3 months of premiums in your reserve fund. Because if we stop now and we don't have insurance coverages, can't afford it, we're going to have claims for 3 to 6 months. We need money responsibly in the bank to pay for those. So that's something I really think you need to talk about, and it's part of my recommendations later on. Any questions about just kind of the fiscal review? So the good news about that fiscal review is that as I look through your academics, you're paying money for good employees that are doing a good job. I looked at your scores the last 3 years, and they're increasing. Your teachers are doing a great job. Your principals are doing a good job managing. You're paying good money for good people. You just don't have a cash balance. And so that's that conversation of a 3-month cash balance and payroll, dollar amounts. So I gave you some indicators there of some star status information. If you go to tab C, I just have one page, and that is current enrollment and cash balance goals. And all I did here for you, and this is really small print, so when you get money in the education fund and for tuition, you pay people with that. So I took every building, I took the total enrollment of every building, took entire amounts of certified salaries, plus all the teachers' aides and employees in the classified salaries, added them all up, divided by the enrollment, and then I color-coded them. If you're spending more than the revenue coming in, which is approximately $6,200 to $6,400 per student, then you're not gathering enough income to afford the number of people kind of in that area. So you have to have some vision and talk about programming. So the only one that's red, which is over $10,000 spent per student, I'm assuming is a special, it's an alternate school maybe? Yes. Yeah. So that is obvious, and so you've got Part B federal monies added there, plus you have special education fund monies. So to have that $10,600 per student expenditure, that's a great thing. I put it in red because it's higher than $6,200. But I for the reason that it's there, it's fiscally responsible to spend that amount of money. The greens, which is amazing, Wilson Elementary, Thompson, Jefferson, Jeffersonville High School. I think the programming, I think those numbers are pretty good. And so all I'm doing is giving you numbers so that you as a group of decision makers can read the numbers, look at the numbers, and I don't recommend, okay? I have my own redistricting, I have my own district issues to talk about when I look at these numbers. So I wouldn't recommend what to do or how to do that. I just want you to fiscally understand who's spending what and where it's going, okay? And I did that on one page. At the bottom of that is my recommendation of a cash balance goal. I think you should have between $4 to $6 million eventually. And when you look at the other school systems of your like size, they do have 2.2 up to 15, maybe 17 million. I don't think that's fiscally responsible. I think 3 million, you need to be able to pay 2, if not 3 consecutive payrolls to have an adequate cash balance, which is, it would be 6 million because your education fund is $64 million, right? So that's going to be a tough conversation, and I do want to mention, this doesn't happen overnight, okay? This is a good you've got good progress by kind of stifling stopping the expenditures in 14 and 15. So you stabilize there. Now we just need to do some business practices and some other things to bring some dollars back into the corporation. So that's that bottom portion.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I understand your cost per pupil.
Yeah.
But at the bottom, under the operations fund, administration costs per employee,
Yeah.
How do we look at that?
So the classified, so the administration classified employees are all secretaries, people who work in this building. It's people who are not paid or not allowed, they're not
How do we
so
can
you're
look at the cost per pupil with the colors and see,
Yeah, so your
how do we know this?
average classified employee is making, your average administrator is making right about $100,000.
I don't see that.
I'm sorry, it's 40, administration is 28,000.
It's 80,000, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's the average, so the administrators are what, basically 60 to 120, right in that 80,000 average. I didn't really, I felt like when I looked at salaries for administrators in your district, especially Mr. Lochner, I felt his salary was very reasonable, very good. And so I didn't really do a deep dive into each principal's salary, but your average administrator makes in the 80,000. That's just base salary. That is not health insurance benefits, things like that. Classified employee is 28,676.
Right. I guess what I'm asking, and I'm not doing a very good job of it, I can see the comparison for the schools.
Right.
I cannot see, if someone said to me, you're top heavy in that downtown whatever, and not that that's ever been said.
Right.
What do these numbers tell me, or do they not tell me anything about that?
It really isn't divided. You have 28 employees.
Okay.
And the 28 employees are costing you,
80,000 each.
yeah, on average, 80,000 per piece.
Okay.
And when I compare that with Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, Evansville, that's a really fair, it's right in the
That's what I wanted to hear.
It's right in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're not grossly overpaid.
Okay.
Especially for a district your size.
Okay.
On a $96 million total budget, to have principals in the 90,000, 95,000 is absolutely average around the state.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and much better than rural districts.
Thank you.
But I didn't give any recommendations on any change there. All right, so tab D, I will not go through a bunch there. I just gave you, there is a report out by the Office of Fiscal Management and by Legislative Services. It's a report that'll come out every year telling you if you're good or bad. And so I gave you those same schools with their fiscal indicators. The first 5 pages are just explanation on how to read the charts and graphs. But if you go to Greater Clark County Schools, about the 5th page in, you'll see that the things that I have mentioned to you have been identified by the fiscal indicators. This is a good snapshot, though, of fund balance increasing or decreasing, or what's kind of going on. And so if you go to the next one, like Jennings County, and you see that on yours, you see the 66 million under 2016, see that number? If you flip to Jennings County, they're roughly half, they're 29 million, but they have a cash balance in the general fund of $2 million. So you can page through those and just kind of see where you're at. I mentioned to you, you had a rough 2014, 2015. See the blue line in yours? This is a nice pictorial, a picture just to show you that's what happened. And I don't have any answers. I'm kind of reporting those numbers where you're at. But again, 18 and going into 19, we've really leveled out there. So the next report that comes after this isn't going to look good. It's always lagging dead. It's 2 years old, right? So so you got 2 more years before it looks stable again. So don't be panicked when you get the next 2017 report, because it's still going to be low. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next tab. It is school board reporting tools. I went to your board meeting documents a month ago, and I just had a lot of difficulty finding out where we were financially. I was just looking, I'm like, wow, there's all kinds of numbers. There's all kinds of pages in the consent agenda and approvals. But where are we at today? And so what I gave you is this next page. It's just a sample of what I call a cash balance update. It gives you 3 consecutive months, the January 1 cash balance, and then I tell my board I'm projecting cash flow of whatever at the end of December. So this is my numbers. These are my numbers. I give a little paragraph because we all can't sit around looking at all these numbers. And so I give a nice little paragraph, and I just said, 1/2 through the calendar year, our finances are exactly where we hoped they would be. And then I went on with kind of the conversation. So what I told them in January, I tell them if I'm right or wrong today, right? Really basic summary there. I would ask, if I was a board member, keep it simple. 72 pages of numbers. I couldn't even find the cash balance. I was like, I had to swim, and I do this for a living, So keeping it simple might be a nice thing there. Pretty easy. Any questions on that? Then I gave you a report, because, yeah, go ahead.
I don't know what you're talking about, 72 pages.
He's looking at the document.
The docket. Yeah, so if you go to the next page, I'll show you something. In the Skyward report, yeah, the docket is all the fund numbers, all the money.
Right.
So I gave you an example. In my estimation of keeping it simple, I give you April, May, June, and those are the end of month 30th month end balance. Okay? This is just page 1, and it's really simple, and it's called the Fund Cash Balance Report. And that, I have the agenda to approve claims just like you do. And it is extensive. Very difficult to comb through all of that. This one page gives you every month, snapshot, end of the fund balance, what you started with on the left side, January 1, revenue brought in that month, expenses, and the end of month balance. That is a very simple tool because you can see, oh my goodness, in June you spent $6 million more than you did in May. And that's expected because you have debt service payments. So you can see it in there very simplistic. So I find that explanation page combined with this one pager is the information to give to a school board. And if I'm the public, if I'm the community, simple. You can just sit in the audience and even understand it pretty simply, okay? Unless I misinterpreted the board docs, it was just a little cumbersome is all. I wasn't here for the meeting, so I don't know.
You can view them online.
Oh, I could have?
They're on YouTube.
All in tape?
On the second board meeting of the month, I have a cash flow presentation.
Okay, good.
Where we'll see a more simpler version.
Okay. Yeah, and then that's what I think is, yeah, I think in the, so you have it 2 every month? Yes, I think that's a great reporting tool. So I gave you the next tab is the Form 9 financial report. So I highlighted a few things, just as a board and as a superintendent, you know, how to ask some questions and different things. Again, I have that general fund, or the education fund cash balance. But 2 other things really popped out on me on the Form 9, and that is the annual financial document that we submit. If you page through a 2018 food service account, if you go back in time, 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015, in 2015 it was negative $250,000. Then moving forward to 2016, it was negative 345, then it was negative 384, now it's negative 590,000. And that's on the Form 9. So that you know, reached out to me. It doesn't appear that that cash balance is going in the right direction with those documents. And so then you can see that 1,100 account in the Form 9. It references that Form 9. 1,100 again is your self-insurance fund. It was 2.9 million. I highlighted 1.2 million. I highlighted 617,000, and then I highlighted the 36,000. All right, so that's a lot of fiscal review. So I'll move on to and then I gave you my budget presentation, just to give you a resource. If, you know, Dr. Dykel can kind of look at that. I'm sure he has his own way to present his budget. I always present that as a usable tool in schools we share, so I like to do that. So if you go to letter F, which is tab F, teacher salary and retirement benefits. That is information, again, numbers speak volumes. If you have 196 teachers that are at the top of the scale, the bottom of the scale to the top of the scale is approximately a savings of $35,000. Having that many out of 638 teachers means a third of your teachers are highly paid. I do want to state for the board, knowing across the state of Indiana, this is a wonderful salary schedule. You're very competitive in your area. You get high quality candidates, so I commend you for the salary that you pay. It's outstanding. We pay $40,000 to start too, and everybody kind of makes fun of Marion County because we pay so much. Well, you know what? You need quality teachers, and you do a nice job, and that's great. And I think that page highlights that. And then you can see the $70,000, $75,000 range is 129 teachers in that category. So again, just speaking numbers, telling you a little bit of that. And I have a recommendation about that salary and some ways to get out from under that amount of dollars that's dedicated. And we'll talk about that later. But what I did want to bring to your attention was after looking at the teachers' agreement, the benefits for retirees are a little, you know, they're rich compared to many, many schools that I communicate with. So if you turn to the second page of that, you're really low with a $2,000 lump sum severance. So if I'm at $75,000, guess what? I'm probably not, $2,000 isn't going to tell me, you know, I'm wanting to retire. So that's, I highlighted that for your conversation, and I think that Mark can kind of guide you down that discussion and talk to some other superintendents that use that paragraph in a different manner. In Beech Grove, we give 12.5, is that right? We put it in the contract. We don't do an early buyout incentive. We don't entice them. We just put it in there, that when they reach that goal and they feel financially secure, that amount of money, 12.5, pays for 2 or 3 years of health insurance for me. Gives me a better feeling of going out when I feel, you know, my best. If I'm still awesome at teaching and I want to teach, I don't take it, right? So that's a cultural thing that you as a board and community need to discuss. However, the area that is, again, is out of the norm is the health insurance access. Most school corporations that I deal with, and mine included, do not pay the employee cost. They give they have the retirees pay 100%. The benefit of retiring from the corp is that you have the ability to be on the plan until age 65. And that's a wonderful benefit, just to have access to the plan. But then to pay 78% of their premium, they're not working. I'm teaching. Who's paying the premium? I'm teaching. The retiree, right? Unless you're taking that money and while they're employed, putting it aside to have it funded in a fund to pay for that retiree for 10 years, you might consider, I don't know if you have another fund that is a post-employment benefit fund and put dollars in there. We do. We put that money in there from a bond sale in 2002, and then we slowly paid off all of those. And so that was like that retirement severance fund, the debt service fund that is a retirement severance fund. But to continue that benefit, to be fiscally responsible, what do you need to do? You need to fund it. Okay, not fund it after they're gone, because that's a post amount. The other one is the group term life insurance. We let them port and again pay 100%, but they no longer remain in the group life. Because the group is the group paying the premiums, which is a school corporation. And I would anticipate that might be a discussion for current employees. So those are two items that can't just be turned on or off. That's a bargaining item. That's a discussion when you do contract bargaining. So that's legally, there are strings attached there. I'm just telling you that those two are pretty rich in nature. Any questions about that agreement? Okay.
Any questions for us?
Sure. All right, so I went to the health insurance, life insurance, and ancillary insurance. I did read again in the teacher's agreement the consensus on health insurance carrier, which would be United Healthcare, those kinds of carriers. Does take an insurance committee decision, but as I read through the contract, I felt it was silent regarding utilization of a broker. So what I did was I gave you some more information about, and there's an article, and it's a very long article. If you want to dig into it, you can, but it's 24 pages long. Data mining for healthcare, pharmaceutical costs, prescription drug costs, and high-end illnesses such as diabetes, things that cost a lot, strokes, heart attacks, things. That's driving the cost incredibly. So to have a broker or a broker dealer that may be at a national level who can break down the data for you, tell you why you were overly expending or why you're not, or you had a good year, or they can actually go out and carve out the pharmaceuticals, do prescription drugs alone outside of the healthcare, have a different premium for that. There's a lot of tools out there to investigate that, since the cash balance has decreased consistently over 4 or 5 years, would be my recommendation, is to really dive into that. I did talk to Mr. Loeffler. He said that was underway, and you have a couple of really good opportunities to look at. At the end, my recommendation will be, don't wait till this time next year. Your cost savings is $1 million, at least, $700,000 to $1 million annually in that one area alone. If you wait, that's where your cash balance can jump back into the education fund, is to redevelop. And I'm not saying that you would cost your employees any more money. You just have a different business model, potentially. There's a lot of clinic. I know you have clinic services. You have a really good structure. I'm just not so sure it's as cost effective as it could be. So I gave you some examples and some tools in there to look at. The other tab I put in there was a business report that I use from smore.com, which is a newsletter. And I did great time, it's section 125 time, and I talked about cancer insurance and all kinds of things. And I did a price comparison between American Fidelity, Aflac, and I showed this is not a cost savings for the corporation. This is a cost savings to me, the employee, on every check. So if I get comprehensive critical illness, then I have extra coverage and $10,000 cash if I have a heart attack, a stroke, an aneurysm, like 15 things. And if I just had cancer insurance, there's a cost value but only one illness. In this comparison, I just took the like products, and employee number 1 was saving $30. Employee number 3 was saving, employee number 1 saved $116. And that's per pay. $105 for employee 2. These are real employees of my school corporation that I made them anonymous. And then employee 3 just changed from cancer insurance to critical illness and saved $40. So it's just a communication I used as we were making a decision on do we have the right vendor. So again, kind of a request for proposal and look at some numbers in that area. I think it benefit your employees quite well. H is banking services. I recently changed banks at my school corporation, and we receive quite a bit of an incentive. We do have to, and we're willing to. We made $1 million, and we are a $30 million school corporation. So now we will end up moving to Teachers Credit Union, and we did actually July 1, and we made payroll right now. That was a real scary part. You gotta move all your money to a new bank and then make payroll. We did. But we're gonna name our football field TCU Veterans Stadium. It's naming rights, and they're giving us money on an annual basis, and I'm increasing about 1% on average. So I called up TCU and I gave a hypothetical, and I said, hey, if I had a $98 million, an average $20 million cash balance on a year, month by month, how much money would I make? And it's over $1 million. So theirs is 2.3% return, and currently I think you're about 1.5. I'm just saying, it might be a positive to shop around. So I gave you that. I gave you my contract and an example RFP in case you did want to go out looking at that. And then I gave you my business and personnel update when we changed. And in there, they gave us $150,000 for naming rights with construction opportunity. And down the road, I think that we'll anticipate looking at a turf field, things like that. So that's maybe a positive opportunity for you to look at. And then I gave you my actual banking proposal. I called Huntington because I think they're a really good bank. And again, I'm just picking partners, people that I know and do really good service with. Huntington doesn't bank in your area, so you can't do anything. But they had a 2.4%, so they were even a point higher. So I'm not saying it has to be a certain bank. I'm just saying it's good to shop around. Then I gave you a couple articles about Franklin Township, announced an opportunity. I think Prairie Vista Elementary up in St. Joe County made $1 million with a banking change. Blazing a trail, it says. So those are some things. So food service is tab I. And again, I think that I wanted to share with you that another company is out there making $800,000 to $900,000 on the plus end on an annual basis. And the only reason I point this out, I have no idea about your food service. I'm just looking at the numbers, right? And we've gone from 200,000 negative to over $500,000, if I'm reading that number right. And I highlighted that Form 9. So either the food service way it's set up, because I think you own your own employees. I think you pay your own employees. But the management of that, need to sharpen their pencil, or you may have some conversation with a couple other vendors and see if they can give you what they gave me, and that is on page 2 of that. Guarantee the financial performance of Beech Grove City Schools dining program to a surplus of $90,000 a year. If they don't make it, they pay me. So I think that'd be a positive. They also do a nice Thanksgiving dinner, a couple community events for us. They're really well known in our area. So I don't know if they'd be willing to price you, but I gave you a little document from Chartwell that has Lafayette, Fayette County, Munster, Crawfordsville, Pike Township, Wayne Township, and as you can see on that, behind that blue tab, we provide an annual return of $900,000 to $950,000 to their food service fund. And what does that do? That can then be used to buy new ovens, to buy a new cooler, to redo the cafeteria area. What we did, our surplus dollars, I banked them for 4 years, and I completely remodeled our cafeteria at Beech Grove High School to a college feel with plug-ins for their phones, stand-up, high bar seating, smaller individual groups. It doesn't look like a cafeteria. Kids sit together in groups of 5 instead of the big long tables, institutional-like. And I used all that money from food service to be able to revamp that. So just some ideas there I thought I'd bring up. J, facilities, plans, and infrastructure. Dr. Deichel and I talked, and with the cash balances, it's tough to do much, so you really have to do immediate needs, and I think that's hard. I just think that's hard, and with circuit breaker and other things, that's going to always be a challenge, but it's nice. He's got a really great roof plan. He's not dwelling on 5 or 10-year carpet plans and things because you just don't have the monies to budget for that. I would think that may be a goal down the road to get some of those maintenance plans. So I just put that kind of information in there. Bus replacement outlook. You do have 13 buses that are over 12 years old. When a diesel bus gets over 12 years old, it costs you more than it's worth. I can testify on that because we've had to revamp a number of our buses. So I wanted to give you a spend opportunity that is a discount. We moved to F350 Ford engines that are gas powered now. They start on a dime. They don't gum up in the cold weather. They heat up right away. They're much less maintenance. The diesel engine over time, it really burns a lot of oil. It's bad. I'm not a mechanic, but this is what my transportation guy is telling me, and my bus drivers love the idling, the turn off and turn on of the gas power. So you want to pay attention to those 12 because that's another $1 million spend. I know I keep hitting that $1 million mark, but that's kind of a hurdle that Tom's looking at down the road is to replace about 12 more buses.
Excuse me.
So I put a copy of your bus fleet in there. Go ahead.
Do you have contract drivers in your school system?
I do not. Yeah, I struggle. I can't tell you there's any silver bullet at all in transportation. Bus drivers are hard to come by. Contracted services are expensive. But now the schools around me are upping their insurance benefits and they're upping the pay, and then I'm forced to. So bus driving is, you got 40 of them behind you. and a lot of them aren't seatbelted in. It's a tough job.
Yes.
And so the pay is going to struggle. So I don't really have a silver bullet there. It's just going to be kind of hard to work through that. Do you have contracted services? Yeah. So I'm probably the best.
They're both.
Oh, they're both? Okay.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, I think that's a solution you can use a merry-go-round. Just keep working on it.
Just out of curiosity, what do you think of Carmel's proposal to get teachers involved in bus driving? I just throw it out there.
Yeah, I think my teachers work incredibly hard already. I think you're going to burn them out. When a new teacher comes to me, I don't let them coach 2 sports.
Right.
You can coach one, and if I see you're struggling in the classroom, you got a day job. And we like our sports, and we do well, but they have a day job. If you're driving a bus, that's some uncertainty to me. It's unique, and it's a neat idea.
I would say that Carmel probably has a corporation owned buses. And See, with the contractors, you don't have, you save money because you don't have to worry about stuff.
Right.
You let the contractor worry about that. So I like the 50-50 split on
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of my whole point about this fiscal review. As you can see, I did some really big, important high points, and I'm not the decision maker here. I'm just telling you where you're at. I think that's a fair assessment, and I think it's what Mark was asking me to do is just kind of mark these tabs and say, hey, here's an area where is a concern, or an area where an opportunity. And that's really at the very beginning, those first 2 pages, was learning opportunities. Because that's what this is, and how you can get to it. Oh, where am I? Education to operations fund transfer, outstanding, 12% of dollars is going to there. So there, I put an article in there of an 85% rule. There's been a lot of doctoral dissertations and things written about this. 15% can go to operations, but 85% of your money needs to go to your students' instruction. And you're at 87%. And so that's, I think that's outstanding, 88%. So I think that's a good thing. So I kind of put that in there just so that you knew where you were. So then in the recommendations, basic, tabs B through E, set an established goal and monitor cash balances moving forward, keeping it simple. Number 2, you might want to talk about that teacher-to-pupil expenditures per location, because in some locations you're spending more than the revenues coming in per student. In that conversation, I would maybe consider raising a teacher retirement incentive, but that's your money, but it's cost effective. Every teacher, I gave you an example, at $75,000, going down to $40,000 plus benefits is well over $35,000 per teacher. Times 30 teachers is $1,050,000. 30 teachers, so you have 196 at that level. There's an opportunity there, so I just thought I'd throw it out there. Number 3, cost-effective approach for health and other insurance opportunities, and I think you're going down that path. However, I recommend sooner than later, because you're spending on a platform that's pretty high right now. And I was kind of talking, I don't do your negotiation things, but I did notice that the University of Kentucky, the University of Louisville, the state of Kentucky have all moved to Anthem. Anthem is competitive in your area, and you don't have it. Get a price point from it. It won't change. Anthem's network is huge. You won't have to change your premium structure. It'll affect your clinic, but this is a conversation that's $1 million a year. So keep it in mind. Banking RFP is number 4. Number 5, maybe reevaluate your food service vendor, conversation, create some competition, make people sharpen the pencil. Number 6, I came up with in a conversation actually with Mark about an energy audit. They were talking about some energy savings. You had a vendor recently. And Steve may talk about it as well. I like LED, love it. You're gonna save money every place. It costs you in the front end, and Steve will talk about, I don't know how you pay for that. In the front end, if you have 20 buildings, it's a lot of money. Do it piece by piece. But every time you replace lights to cost efficient your electricity, and electricity is high and getting higher, so it's an area you need to pay attention to. I am not a proponent, this is just the skittish business manager in me. I don't like windmills and I don't like solar, because I don't trust the energy companies. One time they're taking 40% from you, the next board meeting they're taking 60. It's regulated, and I'm not in control. I'm in control of light bulbs, okay? So that's just kind of my thoughts on the energy audit. Bus leases, I bought 10 buses in my district at about $50,000 cheaper per bus than the diesel buses. The Ford F-350s are cheaper, and the gasoline's cheaper than the diesel. So even if you buy it in bulk and things, it's still going to be cheaper. So you cut your operations, transportation, and your bus replacement opportunity. just a thought, might as well have them quote it, they're in the business to do that. And then the last thing is really that debt service, it's circuit breaker. Everything is really complex in your tax incremental financing, the redevelopment commission. So I teach that, but I can't tell you that I totally understand all of it. However, there is some conversation, and I would love to know if you've heard some rumblings from your end of the market. Is there some conversation about some shall, may language on TIF monies from the redevelopment commission maybe being pushed back to schools eventually?
Yeah, there are some statutes that do allow some.
So they're having some conversation, and I think that that's something you represent a huge community, right? You have legislators here.
It's been proposed for the last 3 years to change the
So politics.
may to shall, but it failed last time we had.
Yeah, I keep politicking on it. I think that testifying in front of the House Ways and Means, I've done that. I did some of that on the healthcare. I helped, I was helpful in House Bill 1260, and really happy with that. So just keep banging the drum, I guess, is the best, but I just wanted to bring it up. And with that being said, I don't go into the bond council or the, I employ Humbaugh and Stiefel and Ice Miller for that area. So really, that's my presentation and my portion, and I kept it within an hour. I did my best there. I know I gave you the binder on purpose. If you're interested in an area, I will give a PDF copy. There's a binder copy somewhere. It should be easy to read if you want to delve into one of the tabs. I know I flew through 160 pages there. I did. But it's really good information. And it is school business finance, and it is something that boiled down. Every one of these areas is going to be talked about over the next year, because these are the big dollars that you're going to be discussing and trying to get that cash balance. And so those recommendations, I think, are reasonable, but every one of them takes a decision-making group like you to decide it. So I'm going to invite Chad Blacklock and Matt Shoemaker. They're from Stiefel, and they're going to do the debt service, kind of your whole assessed evaluation of Greater Clark County, all of that. Any questions for me before and I'll stay here for any questions later on if you want to talk about anything in particular. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, restroom.
I need one to
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you, Tom, for the information you presented. My name is Chad Blacklock. Our company is called Stiefel. We're located in Indianapolis, downtown. Our main forte is working with school corporations on their finances, mainly focusing on the debt side and capital finance side of the school district. A little bit of background about me. I'm 18 years in education. Of those years, I spent some years in the classroom. I also spent almost 9 years as CFO, COO of Franklin Township Schools in Marion County, neighboring district to where Tom is an assistant superintendent at. I was also a couple years director of finance and operations for the Vincennes Community Schools, kind of down south. I'm gonna let Matt introduce himself.
Matt Shoemaker, good afternoon. I've been with Stiefel roughly 8 years. If you don't know the Stiefel name, we previously were City Securities. So I started my career in Chicago, one of the larger national investment banks. But grew up in Indiana, so I wanted to get back here at some point. Job opened up, so I came back to start with City Securities in 2011. And then Stiefel bought us in January of 2017. We have some stats on here for Stiefel. The point of this is not for us to sell ourselves, so if you guys want to read that later, you certainly can, but we're going to skip the first several pages. But the first page does have our bios and just a brief synopsis of what we did on the bond side in 2018. We're the largest K-12 school bond underwriter in the nation and in Indiana. So again, I'm not going to go through all those pages. But I do want Chad to talk a little bit more about how we approach things and not so much our business.
So just to review a little bit about about some of the things that Tom talked to you about. We talked about the capital finance side of schools. The capital finance is paid back through municipal bond issues, which are funded through the debt service fund. And Tom talked a little bit about, you have the debt service fund, you also have the pension bond fund. We're going to talk a little bit about both of those. Both of those funds are primarily funded by property tax dollars, okay? And we've got some points up here. We feel that when we approach a finance project for a school corporation, we'll have a lot of school corporations call us up and they'll say, we want to do a $3 million bond issue next year because we have XYZ project that we want to get funded. We always like to sit down with schools and take a very comprehensive approach. We like to look at their financial picture in its entirety, which is what Tom's done a lot for you with his presentation tonight. So instead of just looking at one individual bond issue, we want to look at the whole financial picture of the corporation through our study. We don't want to get schools into a situation with capital finance and long-range bond issues where one, they might be able to make their bond payments down the road, or they might not be able to achieve the goals or fund the priorities that they want to fund down the road. So in our approach, we take that comprehensive approach to when we look at your finance. We also like to look at priorities. We like to make sure that a school corporation is funding the priorities that they want to fund. It's easy for a school to say, when I ask them, is your education fund balanced or is your operations fund balanced? And they say yes. I always come back and say, are you funding all of the priorities that you want to fund? So we need to make sure that you guys are funding those priorities moving forward. We also take a very customized approach. We don't just shove schools into a template and say, you need to issue debt just like Beech Grove issued debt, or just like Franklin Township entered debt, or Harlem issues debt. Every school corporation is unique, and we want to take a unique approach to that. Again, going back to your priorities and your own situation and what fits your needs. I think in today's world with school finance, because it's become so much more complex, you have to take a very sustainable approach. Sustainability is key, making sure that you don't just get through the next budget cycle, but you can get through the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 15 years, and you've got that long-range comprehensive plan when it comes to your finances. So we like to use the word sustainability. And then, one thing that I think that we bring value is just our experience in all the school corporations that we work with around the state. They're all very unique. They all have their own challenges. And we work with many of those schools to bring them strategies, to bring them ideas. This slide shows you really when we enter into some kind of a capital finance, just kind of the steps that we start to go through. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to get a complete understanding of your goals and your priorities. What exactly you're trying to accomplish from a capital investment standpoint. We then want to pull a lot of your historical financial data, working with some of the things that Tom presented tonight, working with Dr. Deichel, just to see where have you guys been historically. We then want to start to create that future financial plan and different structuring options from your bond issues that will help you meet your goals. We also help with the credit rating, and a lot of times schools want a strategy. You know, are we trying to strategize? Are we trying to increase your credit rating? Do we just want to kind of maintain where we're at? What is our strategy for going into a credit rating process when we start to issue our municipal bonds? And then last and foremost is we actually get your bonds to market. We sell your bonds to the market, getting you the best interest rate that we can on the day of sale. And we do a lot of that through a lot of our pre-marketing that we do to investors as we get those municipal bonds out there. So that's kind of the process that we go through as we enter into a capital finance project. This slide, this really, a lot of schools like this when we go through the credit rating piece. A lot of the credit rating that a school receives when it comes to municipal bonds, a lot of it is out of your control. A lot of it has to do with community demographics, your economy, the local economy, your debt burden. But one area that we can help you with is doing a financial management assessment where we can look at school board policies that might relate to cash balances and debt. We can look at your circuit breaker, we can look at how you manage your tax rate, help you with some of these pieces that will potentially help you maybe get a better credit rating, increase your credit rating score, or just assist you with that piece to help you get some better financial management practices in place. I'm not going to go through too much of this. This slide really talks about when we go to market with municipal bonds, really who we are marketing your bonds to. A lot of schools will ask us, can bonds be marketed to some of your local investors, local banks, insurance companies? And the answer to that is yes. A lot of our school districts will ask if we can market within the community, and we can do that. Probably the one thing that I want to focus the most on is this long-range debt analysis. I think this brings up a lot of good information. And I'm going to have you take a look at the spreadsheet that I passed out to you. It's got a paperclip with it. There's several tabs that are on this spreadsheet. I know some of the numbers are small. We're going to bring it up on the screen. I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of this, and then once you kind of start to see how this flows, I think then you can see how when Matt starts to talk about different structures for debt, how we do this long-range modeling when it comes to tax rate management, your levy, and those different types of things. So as we bring this up here, perfect.
So there's about 8,000 numbers on here, and they're really small when I PDF this, so I thought it'd be a little bit easier if we could just walk through the screen, if Chad could walk through the screen, and I'll drive the mouse to kind of point out what we're talking about, because there's a lot of different things going on here, but I think it's a very, very useful planning tool when you're making decisions now to see how it may impact not only your debt service rate, but your overall rate. So Chad's going to talk about all the numbers that go into the spreadsheet and how we go about laying out that future plan so you know the decisions you make today are going to lead you to where you want to be 5-10 years down the road.
And really the one thing this piece helps you with, we'll talk a lot about managing your tax rate. Just having level debt service payments doesn't always mean that you're going to have always a level tax rate. So those are some conversations that you guys can have moving forward. Some things to think about are, does this board want to maintain a level overall tax rate? Do you want to maintain a level of overall debt service rate? Those are things to think through when you talk about tax rate management, when you start to bring on debt. Some schools are okay increasing their debt service tax rate. That's a strategy that as we work with you guys, we're going to have questions about how we want to manage that tax rate. We use this model to help you guys manage that. So essentially on this first tab, which should be the first sheet that you have, it is a summary page. And it summarizes some of the other information on some of the other tabs. So essentially what you're looking at, if we just start to walk down the 2016 column, your net assessed value for your district is there. You're in 2016, you were a little over $2.4 billion. Okay. As we walk on down that, we can see your debt service tax rate. So that was the tax rate applied to that net assessed value to pay your bond payments back, collections and property tax. So you were a little over 40 cents, almost 41 cents. You do still have a pension bond fund. That pension bond fund actually will go away in 2025. because you will pay your pension bonds off. Your last pension bond payment will be in 2024. So you had about a little over 5 cent tax rate in 2016 in the pension bond fund. As we roll on down through there, prior to 2019, we had a capital projects fund, we had a transportation fund, and we had a school bus replacement fund. Your total tax rate for each one of those, which now is really rolled into the operations fund, was just over 52 cents. We get to the bottom line, your total tax rate in 2016 was 99 cents, just a little over, just shy of $1, okay? So, let me scroll back, I want to show the net assessed value. So you can just kind of see as we scroll, as we go left, you can kind of start to take a look at what your assessed value trend is. So you increased 3.6% from 16 to 17. You went up 4.7% in 18, and you went up 5.6% in 2019. We modeled a 4% increase going out to 2025. Those are conversations that we would have for you later on, just to, we would eventually become, with Mark and Tom, comfortable with, hey, what kind of assessed value growth do we think is going to happen for Greater Clark County Schools? Then if we drop back down to the tax rate section, we can kind of see what your tax rate has done between 2016 and 2019. So you've had some roller coasters. You've been at 99 cents, 84 cents, 85 cents, and at $1.13 in 2019. So we would want to, in this model as we move forward, try and find a strategy that would help us manage those roller coasters a little bit and try and level out that tax rate some. That makes for happy taxpayers when that tax rate is a little more flat. As we move down to the next section, we get into the tax levy section. Again, you can see in 2016 what your levies were for each fund. You were at 24.1 million in 2016. You were at 21.2, 22.5, and then you jumped up to 31 million in 2019. Thus the increase in the tax rate. Okay, so you can kind of see what that historical look has been. So again, our goal moving forward would be, one, decide what is this board's tax rate management strategy, fixed tax rate, fixed debt rate, what you want that to look like. And then of course, as AV grows, you can collect additional dollars on a flat tax rate. So then we've got to talk about what your assessed value is going to be. Okay? Yes, question, yes.
The assessed value you have at the top.
Yes.
All these rates here,
Uh-huh.
do those eliminate the TIF funds that we're not getting?
Yes.
These
TIF is not,
funds-
yes. TIF is not included in those dollars because as you guys know, you don't collect property tax from your TIF dollars unless you pass a referendum. Yes, yeah. Good question. Thank you. Yes, Mark.
So based on your estimation, assessed value for next year, shows that the tax rate will be $1.3296.
Yes, 96 cents, correct.
Based on that.
Just based on that. And based on whatever, a strategy, whatever we would do with your debt service fund moving forward too, because you see your debt rate would drop down to 41 cents.
The circuit breakers are the tax caps.
Yes,
Do those fit into these dollars?
it does, yes.
So that 2,432,000 or 2,432,000 base, that takes into account the tax caps, and that's, so we're not looking at that value, but then we don't collect that value.
Yeah, so
Correct.
we're gonna get to that, and when we get to
Okay,
the
all right,
debt service fund,
yeah.
no, you're fine, it's a great
That's
question.
a great question.
When we get to the debt service fund, you can see up here, we have a line with tax cap loss.
Okay.
So that will immediately come out of you have a levy, what you're gonna levy, and when you take out circuit breaker, you have a net levy that you expect to collect. So that is coming out of this spreadsheet, down in our first spreadsheet. This is purely just what we would call a dashboard, it shows kind of overall what's going on. But yes, all of these numbers would include that expected circuit breaker.
So, and to answer your question, probably want to see that tax levy section. To answer your question probably a little differently, so if you look at your total tax levy in that tax levy section, that would be gross of any tax cap loss. That's just your certified levy. It looked like you guys are losing between 4 or 5 million a year. Is that right, Tom? Okay. Around 4.5 million a year in tax cap. So you would want to take 4.5 million million off of that number to say, what is our net revenue we're bringing in from taxes. Does that help? Yes. Okay, good.
I think the true importance of this page and this entire financial plan is it's a live financial plan. So you can see where you've been the last 3 years, where you are this year, and then where you're going in terms of the tax rate. So when the board and the administration figures out what our desired tax rate is, then you can start modeling, your debt, what you're going to do with operations, and other things to piece that together, so you know the decisions you're making again now is leading you down to where you want to be in the future. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out. Obviously, we don't know what assessed value is going to do in the future. Right. We don't know what circuit breaker is going to do in the future. We can talk about policy analytics in a little bit. We have ways of coming close to these projections, but they truly are just projections. But we can identify something 5 years down the road based on various outcomes to know, hey, maybe we don't want to make this decision. So I think it's been helpful for our clients to know we have 3 different scenarios. 1, 2, 3, how is this going to impact us in the future, and what fits our needs and our goals, not only now, but make sure we're in a good spot in 5 years. To Chad's point, when it comes to debt, we don't ever want to say, hey, you can do $50 million of debt, but we're going to lock up your tax rate for the next 10 years. With you guys knowing in year 4, there may be other needs. So again, this can just put together, whether it's a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, whatever you want to do to make those important decisions and to see real time what it might do to that tax rate.
In 2019,
Yes.
we have this huge raise in our tax levy for debt service and for operations.
You did.
And from your analysis, can you shed any light on that, or is that an internal conversation?
Yeah, we can have those discussions. You'll see in one of our next tabs kind of what happened. How.
All right, I'll hold on questions.
But we will get there.
So, and this is a snapshot of today. You guys did nothing else in the future in terms of your debt rate. This is what your debt rate would be over the next several years. So obviously, we're going to have discussions about potentially what you could do, how you could fit it in. But through the course of our conversations, I think we'll want to know what is that goal for your overall tax rate. We can structure these things a million different ways and hit all kinds of different tax rates. But clearly, it's not our school, it's not our money. We're going to want that direction from you of, hey, let's stay at $1.13, or let's go back to $1, $1.10, or maybe you want to see, hey, we have these needs. What would that then lead our tax rate to be? So we can run these scenarios a million different ways. We don't want to inundate you with 17 different options before. So that's why we've come more of here's where you are today. Maybe here's something to think about. Give us some information, and then we can go back and update that entire analysis.
Yeah, and our whole goal here today is just to give you things to think about. And then we wouldn't want to come back and talk about that need. What is that strategy moving forward, and then we can start to update this model and then finally get it narrowed and funneled down to where we give you a solid presentation on future financial. If we scroll down that to the bottom section, I want to talk about these 2 sections. I'm going to start with the operations levy section down at the very bottom. So when the operations fund was created in 2019, the DLGF, through state statute, also gave us the ability to apply what we call the growth quotient to the operations fund maximum levy. So the operations fund is driven by a maximum levy. It's a max levy fund, right? Transportation and bus replacement were max levy funds, and capital projects was a maximum tax rate fund. All 3 of those funds put in the operations fund. It's all now a max levy fund. It grows by the growth quotient every year. The growth quotient is the same across the state. That's a number that the DLGF gives us and is applied to every school corporation in the state. Okay. The growth quotient in 2018 was 3.4%, in 2019 was 3.4%, And in 2020, it is now, it's going to be 3.5%. Again, this is the maximum levy that you can ask the taxpayers for to fund operational expenses. So in 2018, your levy was at $11,914,649. When you apply the 3.4% in 2019, it went up to $15,421,777. So you had a substantial increase in your levy that you could have levied in 2019. You have to neutralize the pension bond levy. So when pension bonds were put into place, the statute also said that if you ask the taxpayers to pay for pension bonds, you have to reduce your levy in one of the other funds by a similar amount. We call that levy neutralization. So for you in 2019, you had to neutralize by just a little over $1.1 million. So that really then brought your max operations fund levy down to $14,299,000. Okay, that was up $2.3 million from the previous year, 2019. You did pretty much levy your full amount. Your certified levy ended up being $14,295,585. So, Teresa, back to your question, that was one of the reasons that that tax rate creeped up, is because you increased, that was one factor, you increased your operations levy by a little over $2 million from the previous year to get more money into the operations fund. So that was one factor that went into that. Does that make sense? And then what I do moving forward is I just show you how you're going to be able to collect, how much that maximum levy is going to grow in the next coming years. I base it on a very conservative 3% ABGQ. It's probably going to be more in that 3.5% range moving forward. But you can see how that operations levy starts to compound, as Matt's highlighted here, between 2020 and 2024. You're going to be up to collecting potentially $4.8 million additional dollars in 24 over 2018. That's substantial as that grows. So that all comes back to that tax rate management strategy. Does the board want to collect all of that additional levy? If so, depending on how your AV grows, because if AV does not grow to an amount equal to or greater than the growth quotient, you'll have to raise the tax rate to collect the maximum. Does that make sense? So that's where now we start to see we get into the strategy piece. What's AV going to do? What kind of debt payments are we going to bring on? And what are we going to do with our ABGQ? We have some schools that work with us and they say, we don't want to take all the ABGQ because we want to stay at a level tax rate, and our AV is only growing by a couple % every year. My word of caution in that strategy is you've got to think about what you're paying out of the operations fund. You're paying for buses, you're paying for roofs on buildings, you're paying for carpet, you're paying for fuel in your buses. You are transferring dollars from the education fund to the operations fund. My point being, costs are going to go up by inflation. If you are choosing to say, I want a level tax rate, and I'm not going to capitalize on this additional revenue, you can see how potentially you could start to get yourself upside down in the operations fund, which for a lot of schools could lead to transferring more money from the education fund to operations. As Tom pointed out, you're in a pretty good spot right now, transferring only 12%. You get yourself in a position where now we're having to transfer 18 to 20% to fund buses, and now we're robbing from our pay for our teachers and what's going directly to the kids. So again, these are just things that I want you to think about as we move forward, okay? And then in this section right above that, one thing that I showed you here, we're going to talk about this when we get to our next tab. When you calculate your levy for the debt fund, there is a line that we call line 11, which is the operating balance. That is essentially the cash balance that you are allowed to carry in the debt service fund. A lot of schools use line 11 to manage their tax rate because cash sitting in the debt service fund really is of no value to you. Because the debt service fund can only be used for one purpose, to make debt payments. So why do we want to leave $10 million in cash sitting in that fund when all it does is sit there, right? So part of our strategy working with schools is to say, first and foremost, make your debt payments. Whatever we need to do to make that happen, then let's manage everything else through some kind of a strategy. This just kind of shows you what you guys have been doing over the last few years with that operating balance. You know, in 16, you were collecting $296,000 less than you could have in your max. You were a little under in 17. You lowered it substantially in 18, and I would guess that's because you were managing your tax rate by doing that. But then you increased it back up in 2019, which again goes back to one of the reasons that your tax rate jumped again, because we brought some additional cash back into that fund, okay? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a management strategy is all it is.
To your question about why it jumped so much, so if this number right here, the 354,000, would have been 4.5 million or 4.6, that would have gone on top of this levy and it would have increased your tax rate. So it was artificially held down, which is fine. Lots of schools do that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. Again, we don't know the decisions that were made. We can just look at the numbers. But if that number was held down to keep this at 9.4, then you can see the next year, this year, it was increased back up, which caused that levy number to go up between the line 11 and your debt payments. It caused that to go back up, kind of both hit at the same time, which made that tax rate jump up. Again, I'm not saying it's good or bad. This happens to lots of schools, but that's what happened.
Okay. Let's walk to the next page. This page is probably going to be difficult for you to see in your tab, so you may have to, it's very small, which I know it is. There's a lot of numbers there. So essentially on this tab, this is the tab that we use to project out your tax rate and your tax levy in the debt service fund based on, first and foremost, a given structure of debt payments, okay? Then plugging in assessed value assumptions and different things like that. So this is the calculation that you actually go through the legal budget process to create your tax levy and your tax rate and your debt service fund. So again, I'm just going to walk down through 2016. You can see your assessed value there. And you can see that in 2016, you guys had 6.3% of either tax cap loss or maybe potentially non-collections of tax revenue. Essentially, you collected 6.3% less than your statewide tax levy, okay? As we roll down through there, line 1 is your payments for that particular year. Line 2 are your last 6 months of payments for the prior year. If you do any temporary loans, you can just kind of start to walk down through that calculation. And it is a crazy calculation. The reason we call it the 16-line statement is because there are 16 steps to the calculation. Essentially, when you get down to the end, it comes up with what is your tax rate and your tax levy, okay? And so you can see those numbers going to correlate to the previous tab. This is probably the most interesting section, is the section that is red, which are your debt service payments. Okay, so each one of those lines on line 33 or 30, whichever row you're looking at, all the way down through, that highlights this, all the way down through line 64, 61, those are payments being made out of the debt service fund, okay? And each one of those are individual bond issues. As you can see, we do have a line in there that we model future debt. So the numbers that we're looking at right now are your current debt picture. The tax rates and the levies are just based on your current picture. So you guys have several outstanding bond payments. And then you have some fees that you pay for. You can reimburse yourself for free and reduced lunch textbooks. And then we do put in there, a lot of schools will put in there some dollars for temporary loan interest in case you need to do some temporary loans. So you can start to see moving forward, you had 11.2 in payments in 16, 10.2 in 17. We jumped up in 18 to 13.3 in payments. And then 13.4, and then you can see as they kind of move, you start to get a cliff in 23, 24, and then you can see you get an even larger cliff in 2028, okay? And I think most of your debt is then, as right now, paid off from like 30, looks like your last bond issue goes out to 2036 as of right now. That last payment of $1.5 million, okay? So that starts to get you start to get an idea of your current debt picture. Questions about that tab? Okay. Let's go to the next one. The one thing that we like to look at, the 16-line statement tab is what are your certified levies, what are things that are certified. We like to also actually look at real cash. What is a real cash flow in the debt service fund? We do have schools that have high circuit breaker loss. The school corporation that I was at before, Franklin Township, being an example, we were losing about 35% of our revenue to property tax caps. That equated to around 13 to 14 million a year. You guys are in that 4 million range. When I got there in 2010, they were unable to make their debt service payments due to the amount of revenue they were losing to property tax caps. We were about $3 million shy. We had $25 million in debt payments, but we only had $22 million in revenue coming in. So a few years of that and using up all the cash, then you're in a zero. You do not have the money to make your debt service payments. We've got a few clients that we work with that have gotten themselves into that same financial picture over the years. So we want to make sure that we don't get our clients into that situation. So that's why we look at real cash. And that's where your circuit breaker loss is imperative in this situation. So if we again just look at 2016 on this tab, you've got your assessed value there. You've got what your certified tax levy and rate were, and you have the amount of loss that you were receiving in circuit breaker. Tom, you guys are not filing for the waiver right now, is that correct? Okay. Okay. Don't meet the qualifications. Okay. So you are essentially right now taking the brunt of your tax cap loss in the operations fund. Probably the majority of that $4.5 million is coming right out of the operations fund. Because the debt service fund is what they call a protected tax levy fund. That means unless you meet certain qualifications, you won't take any real circuit breaker loss in the debt service fund. The state enacted that law because they realized schools were going to get themselves into a situation where they couldn't make their debt service payments. So they're making you take that full hit in the operations fund. So as we scroll down through here, you can see your net levy. You can see some of the other miscellaneous revenue that you bring into the debt service fund. So essentially you started 2016 with $3.6 million in cash. January 1, that money was sitting there in cash. You brought in $10,702,000 in revenue that year. You paid X amount of payments for that calendar year. So you paid 11.1 in payments. So that year you actually had a budget deficit in the debt service fund to the tune of negative $474,000 net income. So that lowered your cash balance. Lowered your cash balance down to $3.1 million, which was 28.6% of expenditures. So really what I like to look at here is just what your December 31st cash balance has been doing. So you can see you were at 3.1, then you lowered down to 2.7, then you dropped down to 5,936. And then it looks like in 2019 you should probably go back up, and that is because you raised that line 11 operating balance back up in your levy, which is why the tax rate levy jumped up so much. In our projection moving forward, we are assuming maxing out the line 11 operating balance. Again, that is not what we have to do. We can lower that down some to either A, lower the tax rate, or B, some schools will lower the operating balance down and bring debt in on top of that. So if you lower the operating balance down $1 million, you could bring on $1 million of additional debt payments if you wanted to do that to maintain a level tax rate. That's just another strategy that we can use. So again, we've assumed to just keeping that maxed out moving forward. So you can kind of see what your cash balance will do. You know, it hovers in that 28 to 30% range moving forward. Okay. Questions? Just a little bit to digest, right? I mean, just a small amount.
Well, I think the point of all this is not for you guys to understand the actual budgeting process. It's to show you what goes into our analysis. We're not just pulling these numbers out and saying, hey, we think this is what's going to happen. We're saying this is what we think is going to happen because we're actually going through the full 16-line statement again. AD can change, circuit breakers can change, those are two projections that you don't know what's gonna happen, a recession can come, but the rest of it are hard numbers, and we know we're probably gonna be pretty close, without a huge financial shock to the school.
And the next two tabs, the next two sheets are purely the same, it's the same calculation before your pension bond fund. Now, you won't be taking on any additional debt in the pension bond fund, that statute has expired. And like I mentioned, but it does still have a tax rate and a tax levy out through 2025. So we like to model that out just so we can, again, see what your rate and levy is going to be in that particular fund as well. Really, that debt service fund is the one we're going to focus on as we go down this journey. So I think Matt's probably going to close this, and Matt's going to just kind of walk with you now more on a charts and graphs kind of picture, and not so much in a spreadsheet form.
Yeah, and real quick before we get out of this, the future debt that Chad alluded to, we don't have anything in here right now because no decisions have been made, but this is where we're talking about the real time. You can go into here, you can type in a number, and it's going to compute what your tax rate going forward is immediately. So we can show different payments, then we have software that shows with these payments, how much money could you raise? Whether you're doing one big issue, yearly issues, whatever you guys want to decide. So when it comes to what's your desired tax rate moving forward, we can tell you exactly, well, this is how much payments that you could have, and with these payments, you can raise X dollars. And again, we can run it based on all kinds of different tax rates if you guys want to see multiple scenarios. But we can type that in and then back into what you can actually raise. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea. Take a quick break.
Take a 5-minute recess? Yeah. Whatever they want. All right.
Now that you guys have had a few minutes to relax, I'm not throwing things at you. Any questions on what we just talked about that may have popped into your head you want to talk about now while it's fresh? My portion actually, thankfully, is very, very short. Chad got all the hard work out of the way early. But again, if you want us to go through anything else again, or you have questions about what the heck we just said, we'd be happy to go over anything else that you'd like.
Anything more before we move on to long-range debt balance?
Well, I do have a question. Currently, if we want to keep that revenue, the tax rate at $1.30. So, Tom, you want to do that there? Okay. Tom, ready?
No, we don't want to do that. No, we do not want to do that.
I'm just asking, you know, the reason I'm saying that, you have to go back over 10 years. Our problem is that we was trying to maintain too low, and I remember when we had a cash balance of $5 to $8 million. But what happens is that when we start playing the game to keep the taxes low, then it went away. So that's just something to discuss later.
Well, I'm saying that I'm still unclear about, you know, there's some figures in here that I know Tom is going to get a couple of answers from me on, but, you know, our tax rate is going along just fine. And it's going to go back to just fine, but we had that 1 year, this year, where it went. So I think we need to really take.
Right now, we're gonna be removing our hands.
Yeah, I don't think we keep it.
We can't.
That's a conversation for later. Let's talk about it.
Mr. Hawkins, what happened to your microphone?
I'm sorry.
Told I did. Okay. So the long answer was no, we have no questions.
And there is, while we can't give you the answer, we can compile the data of comparable school districts with where their tax rate is. I will tell you a lot of schools this side would have a higher tax rate. I'm not saying where your tax rate is good or bad. We could gather that data. If that's something that you wanted to see, that's something we could put together.
Well, I guess what I was going to say is that we have that up and down. Then that's when you get the community upset because, okay, now it's 90 cents, now it's $1 something, now it's not, you know, you're gonna have rebellion either way you go, but if you stay somewhat consistent, you generally, and I'm not saying that's what we need to do, I'm
You
just
don't ever
saying.
get the calls on the year that the tax rate goes down.
Right, where are those calls?
So, that, again, part of the plan that, you know, you guys are cognizant of wanting to get that tax rate steady at whatever rate, that's what we want to help.
What if
you
you're a
with.
large district like we are, surrounded by smaller districts, so when people look at, you know, taxes, when they want to move, like property taxes and things like that, and they're not gonna be like, oh, well, that's because they're a giant school district. You know, I mean, is it good to compare even surrounding that are not our
Yes.
size?
Yes, so a lot of times what we'll do is comparable size, and then we'll do within your county, and then within your conference, or anyone else that you would tell us to. We can get a list of 50 schools together pretty quickly and show you exactly where their tax rate is and where you guys fall.
Do you also analyze the demographics of the community based on tax rate? For instance, we look at another 10,000, how much is Floyd County?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
I look at the tax rate in Floyd County compared to here, the demographics are completely different.
Yeah, so there are certainly ratios that we can look at, you know, debt per student, we can look at all this different stuff. When it comes down to the actual what's going on within that community, you guys would know.
We have the ability to do that.
We can certainly come up with debt ratios, per pupil ratios, other things, per capita, per actual population. There are a
Would
host
that
of
include,
ratios that we can show.
like Louisville and Oldham County as well, like in Kentucky, like could we do that, we're so close to the state line? I mean, we're on the state line.
Yeah, I don't know why we couldn't. I personally don't know anything about the taxing system in Kentucky, so I wouldn't know to tell you if it's the same as it is here. We don't cross the line here in Indiana.
Okay.
In terms of what we do.
Right.
So, yes, I just don't know if it's truly accurate or not, is what I'm trying to
Okay,
say.
thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anything else before I get started? So this section, I'm going to take 5 or 10 minutes. Again, stop me if you guys have questions. We can talk about this. This can be an open discussion. But what we always look at when we come to present to school is what are you guys currently looking at in terms of debt? I know we walked through some of that in Chad's 16-line statement in terms of the payments, but we always find that it's helpful just to list everything out. So on this page, I'm on slide 14, we have a listing of all of your current outstanding debt obligations. We have them in short form, so FMB is a first mortgage bond, which is just something done for new money purposes, additions, renovations, actual new buildings. The FMRB is first mortgage refunding bonds, so this would have been an issue that was previously outstanding, that because of interest rates at the time, you actually went through a traditional refinancing of those bonds. You have your pension bonds there in the middle. You have the QZABs towards the bottom. Those are qualified zone academy bonds. Those were back during the 2009, 2010, 2011 actual tax credit bonds that are out there of $2 million originally. And then you have some GEO bonds there at the beginning. So original par is just a fancy word for what the original amount of the loan was. So for the first one, the 2018 FMVs, you would have borrowed $13.79 million. You haven't actually made a payment on those yet, so the outstanding par matches that. As you go down, you can see at the very bottom, the 2004 pension bonds, you originally borrowed $16 million. You've paid off almost $9 million of those now, and you have an outstanding balance in terms of the par amount or principal, whatever name you want to say, of $7.3 million. The call date column, that is when you would be able to refinance those bonds. I won't get into it too much, but previously, all municipal bonds, when you sell a 20-year deal, normally they have what we call a 10-year call date. Unlike a mortgage for your own home, if you get a mortgage and rates go down the next day, you can refinance your house. If they then go down again the next day, you can refinance your house. You can keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. With municipal bonds, the investors demand what we call a call date. So if the call date is 10 years from now, it essentially protects the bondholders, saying that they're going to get paid their full principal and their full interest regardless of when you refinance that bond. So if you issue bonds, refinance it a year later, you still have to pay all of those payments through your call date. Now, it used to be that whenever you set your call date, you could advance refund, is what it was called, and you could do that one time, and that meant you could actually refinance it at any time prior to that call date. So if you had a 10-year call date, you could actually refinance it in 5 years. You could do that one time. During the tax reform of 2017, they took that away. So now, when you set your call date, you have to wait until that time. There's a way to get around it with taxable bonds, but I'm not going to go down that right now. So essentially, you see that date for the first one of July 15, 2028. You have to wait until that date now to refinance your bond. So you can see as you go down there that there will be some ability to refinance your outstanding bonds, but it's going to be a few years. The biggest ones will be for those 2014 A and B bonds. But again, you still have 5 years to go until those are callable, which just means they have the ability to be refinanced. And then the last column is the final maturity. Final maturity is just when you will be officially done paying that respective series of bonds. Questions on that? And again, for someone of your size, having this many outstanding bond issues, very, very small. Easier way to look at it is an actual graph. You can see this lined up in terms of payments. And again, we walked through this a little bit, the 16-line statement, but maybe just an easier graphical representation of where you guys currently are in 2019, about $16 million worth of payments. And you can see in the future, there's going to be nice drops almost every single year. So you can see that there will be capacity in the future to issue bonds and keep your rate at whatever number you decide is appropriate for the school district. And we have those color coded based on the various series. So we ran a couple different projections just to give you guys an idea of what your capacity for future debt might be. And we looked at this in terms of if you were going to do an issue every year, based on some different repayments, what are you guys looking at in terms of how much money can we get? So these are all projections. Things can change, but this will give you at least an idea. So this first one, we just assume you keep your debt service tax rate at 43 cents. Again, I just made that up. It doesn't mean that's what you need to go to, but that's what, for purposes of this projection, that's what we ran at. We don't know what interest rates are going to be in the future. They are super, super low right now. If you were going to borrow money for 20 years, you would pay probably 3% on average for that. Extremely low when looking at historical interest rates. Given that they're probably not going to be this low in the future, we ran various options based on a 3.5% interest rate, a 4% interest rate, and a 4.5% interest rate. Again, we have no idea what they're going to be in the future. But based on that and where you guys currently are, if rates stay in the 3.5% range, you guys could do somewhere in the neighborhood of $12 million every single year while keeping that tax rate at 43 cents. Now, we don't know what AB is going to do. That could change things. Circuit breaker could certainly change things. If other taxing units within your overall base are doing stuff to kick up circuit breaker, again, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. If you did go down the route of doing yearly bond issues, we're going to find out information every single year. So when you do that bond issue, you'll have the latest and greatest. Much easier way to project than if you were to say, hey, we want to do 70 million right now because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But with 3.5% interest rate, with what we know now, you can do somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 million. If rates go up to 4%, you're probably in that $10 million range of every single year bond issues. Keep the tax rate at 43 cents. And if it goes up to 4.5%, you're probably in the $8 million range. The next page shows if you keep the debt service tax rate steady at 58 cents. Again, not saying you should do that, but you can show that the capacity to do bond issues goes up substantially. So at 3.5%, if you want to keep a 58-cent tax rate, you could probably do somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 million every single year. At 4%, you're looking at $20 million, and at 4.5%, you're looking at $15 million every single year. Again, not that you need to do yearly bond issues, but that just gives you some idea of, depending on where you want to be. And you can ballpark it. If you say, well, if we keep it at 50 cents, you can just take the numbers between those. I mean, it's going to be pretty close. We can run various scenarios for it. If you guys say, I want to see 45, 50, 55 cents based on various interest rates, we can run those as much as you want. I don't want to show you too many today. I want to give you an idea on the low end and the high end of what you might be looking at.
Looking at your first chart on this outstanding debt and the fact that, here it goes down and it goes down again. If you look at that year, 2028, it really doesn't, and then your chart that shows your total tax rate, even though the debt is coming down, it does not substantially lower our tax rate.
In terms of the 16-line statement, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is where it becomes very nuanced and difficult to understand, because it used to be before circuit breaker, before everything else, pre-2008, essentially if you kept your payments level, you were going to see a level tax rate. Things have changed so dramatically. We didn't talk about the operating balance at all, but all debt before July of 2014, you could keep a 50% operating balance, which is line 11 that we talked about. That switches over after 2014 to only a 15%. So my guess is between 27 and 28, you have a lot of that 50% coming off, and maybe it's transferring to 15%. We can look through the numbers after this and probably tell you pretty quickly. Level payments is not level tax rate anymore. So on this, you can see that the actual payments are bouncing all around, and you say, how is our tax rate staying level? It's just a function of how the state does their budgeting process and how complex it has become, to say it nicely, that without the plan moving forward, it's almost impossible if you want to pay a tax rate to do it based on just running the debt service payments. You really need to do what Chad's doing and putting together this full financial plan with all of your tax rates to see how different payments go forward. It's extremely difficult to explain, and I won't even say that I understand it completely. I would say Chad and Tom probably are very, very close. It's just very, very difficult. So again, that's why when we look at debt payments, we want to get it in that plan to make sure what we're looking at actually is going to fit your tax rate goals moving forward.
Thank you.
I know it's not a great answer.
No, that was a great answer. In a former life, I was an assistant superintendent, but it was before the change.
Yeah.
And it almost meant that if you kept your debt service about the same, your tax rate would stay the same, but
Correct.
it's
Too many
not
things
that
have
animal
changed.
anymore.
They're
That's what you're
throwing
saying.
something new in terms of
New and
the
improved.
budget
Uh-huh.
mechanism almost every year. So
Okay.
staying up on how that all impacts your tax rate in the future
That
is vitally
was,
important.
thank you.
Looking at the charts you have here, it's, and I'm just thinking if I have to explain this to somebody.
Good luck.
The 3.5% estimated interest rate would allow us, at 58-cent tax rate, would allow us about $25 million per year. And then, but a 1% interest rate difference dramatically affects it from $25 million down to $15 million.
Yeah.
So you also pointed out that right now, rates are historically low or very close to that.
Yes.
So and I'm not advocating this, I'm not stating it, I'm not even
I'm
hinting
right
that
there.
it. Well, if a corporation were to look at what's best for the corporation, would they be better to take a lump sum up front under a low rate, which, I mean, as a consumer, I probably would look at that.
I can tell you that a lot of schools are having those same discussions. We always like to tell people that the bond issues should be based off of true needs and not market timing. In other words, predicting where interest rates are going to go. I've been saying for the last 6 years that rates are going up, just because they've been so historically low for so long that they have to go back up at some point. I've been wrong for 6 consecutive years. So someone that tells you, hey, here's what interest rates are going to do, they have no idea. Every time we see rates go back up, last year we saw a rise in rates, we thought, here we go, we're done with the low interest rates, and then they've come back down and almost even lower. July of 2016 was the lowest point in the interest rate in the history of the United States. We are very, very close to that number again. So will rates be higher in the future? Probably. Will they be, 4.5%? That's hard to say. If you look at the slope of the line of interest rates going back 50 years, it's a downward slope. You're looking back in the 80s of interest rates of 15, 16%. They've been coming down every single year. They don't have much more to go before they get to zero. It's a conversation worth having that a lot of schools are having of, might we want to fund things that we thought were 2 years down the road now to take advantage of the low interest rates. It's based on every school. What does their debt service look like? A lot of schools are looking and saying, we have no capacity for 4 years. There's nothing we can do unless we want to increase interest or tax rates. No one wants to do that. So it's case by case. I can't tell you what's best for your school, but it's a conversation that a lot of schools are certainly having.
Is there I realize the Fed can lower it to whatever they want to, and I think effectively for a while they were almost 0%.
Yes,
0%.
correct.
But the bond market, eventually there gets to the point where it can't go below a certain amount. Is that, are we there now, this 3.5%, or can it go down lower?
They can certainly go down lower. I will tell you that what we call the yield curve, which are rates on the very short end, 1 year rates, overnight rates, the Fed funds rate versus the 20-year rates, were very, very flat. So borrowing money at 20 years might be 3%, borrowing money at 5 years might be 2.5%. If you go back several years, that might have been, back when the Fed funds was 0, you might borrow 1 year money for less than 1%, and you might borrow 20-year money for 5%, which is a very steep. So, yeah, it's historically great time to be issuing bonds to lock in interest rates. Don't know what it's going to do in the future, obviously, but yes, it's a very, very good time to lock in short rates. Appreciate it.
If I could just interject a little bit here. There's two other things as the bond lawyer that we always have to pay attention to, and darn it, it's state law and federal law. You're required to define what your project's going to be at the time you issue the bonds.
Right.
And if there's a school district that their patrons care about what you're doing with the bond money, this is it. So this would be something very difficult to be able to try to do it in a hedge kind of, whatever,
Right.
whenever the sun rises. The second part is the federal government does not want you issuing tax exempt bonds any earlier than you need them. Their reasoning being they'd rather investors were investing in CDs or something that they have to pay income tax on, giving money, revenue to the federal government as compared to tax exempt bonds, which takes it out. So there are certain time periods by which you have to spend them. First off, you have to reasonably expect to spend the money, and then you have to actually spend the money, or you start having to make payments to the federal government. So they've taken a lot of the fun out of this. But those are the two really big restrictions that we get, both of which, particularly for this school district, I think are vitally important concepts to pay attention to.
Okay.
But I like the way you think.
Well, I have some reasons why I'm thinking that.
Which is why we always say, let the need and the time determine when you're actually going to borrow the money. I mean, real life, again, Thomas's points are very, very well taken. If you're borrowing money now for something you're not going to do for 3 years, you're still paying interest for those 3 years. So you may be paying more over the life of it. So a lot of different factors go into that. But anyways, it makes sense. That's really all we have. Again, we'll stay here as long as we want and answer questions. We have some references in here. Again, I'm not going to waste anybody's time going over that. It's not about us. And it's some case studies too. You guys can look at that later if you want. We're happy to answer any questions now or later. But we really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The other gentleman also, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Any other questions, board, comments? Mr. Walker? Do you have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Dr. Pate. Do you have a second? Second. All those in favor